Okay, okay, tough. So let's pick up. We got to Rand of Kaftet Amud Aleph, making our way through nearly at the end of the parak. We got up to the end. Excuse me. We got up to the two dots, the first of the wide lines. We're going to pick it up on the second of the wide lines on Daf Kaftet Amud Aleph. Um, we were discussing the Mishnah was talking about measuring, again measuring on Yom Tov, and if you have certain the vessels that one would use, which are of a specific size, to measure out their wine and their oil, etc., which are used for measuring and used for selling, and could you use those? Could you fill up those kelim in such a way that you're essentially measuring, but without intending to do that on Yom Tov? So we saw a couple of different ways of learning the Mishnah. That was what we saw last time. Now, the end of the Mishnah, um, right, you'll see at the end of the Mishnah it says, Maseh, really about halfway through, but Maseh ba'aba Shaul ben Bitnit, שהיה ממלא מידותיו מערב יום טוב, ונותנן ללקוחות ביום טוב. Okay, so he would fill up the jugs before Yom Tov, and only on so everything was filled up and everything was measured, and then give them to people on Yom Tov. Abba Shalom me'af b'moed oseh ken. Abba Shaul says that even on Chol HaMoed, when you're allowed to sell, if you need to, he would do this as well. And we're going to see in a moment exactly why. Right, Abba Shalom oseh ken mipnei berorei amidot. Okay, now notice in the Mishnah it says mipnei berorei amidot, which we're about to explain what that means, but there's a small aleph then. The Gra says nimchak. So he does not have that. So there are two different girsahot of this Mishnah. There are those of the Girsa of Yivnei Be'erei Amidot and those who don't have. So if you look at Rashi in the Mishnah, he says, Af v'cholosh hamoed oseh Big Ma'am mefarish tam. The Gemara is going to explain what the reason is. V'lo gal sinan b'matnitim ibnei be'erei amidot. It's going to come in the Gemara, but Rashi's Girsa also, that's why the Gemara says, was without those words, ibnei be'erei amidot, just Af b'moed.
Rabbi Kenigsberg,
Yes.
are we talking about a situation where people have placed orders for the oil and he's measuring it Erev Yom Tov, and they pick it up on Yom Tov? Are we talking about a case where he doesn't know what customers are going to come in? He's just preparing the stuff for potential customers.
It could be. It could be either. The point is that when the person comes and takes the thing, whether it's on, we're going to focus specifically on Chol HaMoed, but when the person comes in to take their oil or wine or whatever, it's already been measured out before. We're going to see why. Meaning he's not doing it there and then when they come to it, but it's going to be done the night before. So we have these two gifts out of the Mishnah, whether we say mipnei be'erei amidot or not. Ita galus lei v'hein halat al tichot ubigma mefalesh. Okay, the Gemara is going to explain exactly what this means. Um, okay, so even on an ordinary weekday, maybe he would do like that. Okay, so let's see. So the Gemara says as follows. It says, Maseh, we're on the second of the wide lines near the bottom of the page. Maseh ba'aba Shaul ben Bitnit. Tana. Af b'moed oseh ken mipnei bitul beit midrash. So we say, even on Chol HaMoed, he would. So here you see, it's very different. This is why we have these girsot that don't say mipnei berei amidot. It says af mipnei bitul beit midrash. So what does this mean? He would have to measure out his wine, etc., to sell the night before, so there would not be bitul beit midrash on Chol HaMoed. What exactly does that mean? So Rashi says, Tana af b'moed oseh ken mipnei bitul beit midrash. Rashi on the right hand side. There's no Tosfot on the samud, so Rashi goes on both sides. But we're on the right hand side towards the end. Shaya Chacham Gadol. He was a great Chacham, and people would come to ask him shaylas, ask him questions to learn from him, right? ובאים רבים לשאול ממנו, ובמועד רבים עוסקים בתורה שאין טרודים במלאכה. Very important. On the Moed, many people are engaged in Torah. Okay, in between the Tiolim and this and that, whatever. But you're meant to be spending the time for Torah. That's why there is no Melacha It's one of the reasons why we don't have any why we assume malacha on Chol Hamoed as well, to give people an opportunity to sit and learn. So therefore, during the day, people are engaged in Torah more than usual, but they have that extra time, they have that extra headspace. They aren't out doing malacha and going to work, etc. So they're going to come with all their questions. So therefore, היה ממלן בלילה שאין זמן בית המדרש. When was the Beit Midrash open? It was open during the day. And that was the time when they would come ask questions. So we'd fill up these jugs at night so as not to waste time during the day. היה מלן בלילה שאין זמן בית המדרש כדי שיהיה פנוי ביום. In order that he should be free during the day to answer questions and to learn and teach, etc. עכשיו, למען דגלוס בניתים מבלי המידות מפרש אחי. If we said actually that the Mishnah already gave me an explanation as to why I would measure these things out previously the night before, it's because of birurei hamidot. If we do that, so then we have to explain as follows: bitul beit hamidrash shel ba'ei moed lo yeh panoi lishhot ulevalel midotav shelo tichu lefichach malan balala. In other words, what does it mean? It means as follows. You know, when you pour the liquid and it sort of starts to froth at the top, and after a while it goes down, right? Think about here we're talking about wine, but think about if you pour a cup of fizzy drink, whatever, of Coca-Cola, right? And it goes right to the top, but then all the bubbles stop, and then it goes down further. So the same thing happens with the wine. So he's saying, if I pour it in, I pour it to the top, and I say, okay, I filled up the jug, filled up a liter, whatever. But no, if you wait a little bit, and you'll see that it stops bubbling and frothing or whatever, and then it goes down. That's what we're talking about, Berei Midot. So you have to wait, and then there's that little extra bit that you can pour up at the top to make sure that you're being completely honest, and you're not losing out on any on any small amount. So that takes time. It takes time. People have to stop and have to wait, and etc. So then people are going to come and they're going to be standing there in the queue and they're going to be waiting for their wine and waiting for the oil and waiting for all these things. And they want to go back to Beit Midrash and learn. So we don't want that to happen. So we want to do it as quickly as possible. So it's done the night before. That's the idea. Right. So then I have a moment of second maybe to Beit Midrash. Yafe. Now, what you see from that, I mean, this is the Gemara is now going to bring a number of stories. You see how careful one has to be, and how much one has to be, how honest, and how important is even the tiniest amount here. That it's not going to be it's not going to be any form of gezer or anything like that. So we said Tana Avomed of second, maybe two might do. Okay, Tana Labanan. What's the end of the second one? Tana Labanan. Hu kanas 300 גבי יין מבלי המידות, וחבריו כנסו 300 גבי שמן ממיצוי המידות, והביאום לפני הגזברים לירושלים. He's saying, what did they found? He found over time, he gathered together 300 barrels of wine. That again, this little amount, this extra, once it stops frothing and bubbling, etc., and that's the amount that you have to add to sell. So he says over time, again, I don't know how long this period was, but over time there were 300 barrels of wine that he had left over that he worked out that he had not sold appropriately or given to the customer. That was the amount that came to them. Right? וחבריו כנסו 300 גבי שמן ממיצוי המידות. And his friends and his colleagues got together 300 barrels of oil, which was from mitzui hamidot, meaning also the sort of oil when you were pouring the oil and there's a little bit that gets stuck on the side of the kli, or it doesn't quite go out, whatever. So they added all of that up. And they worked out that they owed 300 barrels of wine and 300 barrels of oil. Incredible. Rashi says here, Ukanas, Mishnatan yain b'chavit kach v'kach login. Right? So when he was measuring out the wine, and he said, you have such and such a log of wine in the barrel. B'midah, right, umachal mimena, ad shemachal cheshbono, nimtzah kol hanotar, and he sold that whatever amount in the cheshbon. נמצא כל הנותר בחבית על ידי ברורין שהרתיח היין כשמוציאו ומעלה הופיע שקום הבלה. Right? We're talking about the amount that extra that there should be, because when it stops bubbling and it goes down, there's that little bit of extra space in the barrel. It's not a full measurement. And that is called ve'enika in belulin. That's what we call belulei amidot, right? Berin. Why? Lefishem avalulin otan min hayayin, because you have to separate it right from the wine. Sheshoteh, when you drink. Inami al the klishe vezigei shemen yesh po mitzurim mudbak b'shulei hamida u'b'dafnotea. Right? Or this is what happens with the shemen, with the oil. There, it's called mitsui. It's called mitsui amidot. It sticks to the sides and the walls of the kli. Okay, this is more common with the wine than with the oil. Okay, so what did they do? So they wanted to be completely honest, and they found that they had ultimately 300 barrels of wine and 300 barrels of oil that actually did not belong to them. That amount that they should have gone to the customers as well and did not. So what did they do? They brought it to the Gazbalin, to the treasurers, right, in the Beit HaMikdash. Rashi says, "Livnei Gazbalim shel hekdesh, of that which is hekdesh, lasot ben tzolchei hekdesh im yirtzu." They said they're going to bring it to, they're going to donate it. It was sort of like stolen goods, so they're going to donate it to the Beit HaMikdash. Rashi says, "Im lo hikdishuhu kisvurin en yochelim lakdish she'ino shelahem. Inami yocholin havale gezel be'avla." In other words, they did not actually dedicate it as hekdesh. They came to ask questions. They did not dedicate it because it wasn't really theirs. They felt it was gazon. A person's not allowed to consecrate something which does not actually belong to him, or because it's actually considered like theft. So anyway, they brought it to the Gazbarim, Yerushalayim. They said, "No, don't worry. You don't have to. You don't have to give it to us. It's fine." Rashi says, Okay, Rashi, there's a difference of girsa with a letter, the last nun at the end, but e in this case, or ein, really means the same thing. So אמרו להם, חכמים, אין אתם זקוקים לכך, הואיל ומתחילה לא נתכוונתם לגזול, שהלקוחות מוכלים על ידי טלטן. You didn't have any intent, you weren't trying to steal from them. And why is it not considered gezel? Because the לקוחות מוכלים על ידי טלטן ומרוצתם. Meaning there's an implicit forgiveness here. Meaning the person comes and says, "I want to buy however many log of wine." Okay, but the person has in mind, he's not going to stand there and wait. I'm sure you've had the experience when you're in a supermarket or something and you're waiting behind and the cashier is very, very slow, and you just say, "Just get on with it. It doesn't matter, right?" So the people were that little amount of wine, or being able to get back and go back to my Yom Tov meal or whatever. So people don't mind. They have in mind that it just should go quickly, and that's fine. They couldn't stand there and wait, and they knew, and they say, "Okay, it's fine." So therefore, he said to them, I said, "No, but we want to. We don't want to benefit from it. It doesn't belong to us." They say, "Okay, you want to be machmir. So fine, you don't have to dedicate it to hekdesh, but you can use it for tzolkei rabim. You can use it for the needs of the masses, right? For the needs of the public, and that way the public's benefiting from it. So those people who took it, they'll ultimately benefit from it somehow, right?" אמרו להם חכמים, אם כן אין לכם, says Rashi, אם כן אין לכם לעשות הקדש, don't make it הקדש, אלא לעשות בין צורכי רבים. It belongs to the public, so give it back to the public. And that way they will benefit from it. Tanya, we have a bright that is like this. Gazal, ve'eino yodea lemi gazal. The person stole now, and he knows he stole, but he doesn't actually know who he stole from, and he wants to return it, but he can't return it because he doesn't know who it belongs to. What should he do? You should use that, whatever you stole, for the needs of the public. So what are tzokei rabim? For example, marav chista borot shechinu me'arot. cave pits and cisterns and the like where they collect water, that is considered tzorchei rabim. Okay, so so that's what you should do. That's what you should do. If you can't go back and you can't give to the original person who it belonged to, you can give to the tzibor, and hopefully it will come back to that. It will come back to that person as well somehow. Not directly related, but maybe associatively related, and it's that time of year. So we're coming up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as you all know, right? And so this idea of tzorchei rabim, etc., comes up very much. Here we're talking about giving things back, and we have the idea of asking for forgiveness. Before Yom Kippur, person goes, and you meant to go and ask forgiveness from every person who you might have wronged or offended, etc. It's meant to be, the forgiveness is meant to be genuine. It's meant to be as specific as possible, right? It's not meant to be, oh, do you mochel me? That's what I heard. I don't know if you heard about this. I heard a couple of years ago that the newest fad is that people create WhatsApp groups and they just add in everybody to a WhatsApp group that you might have a thing, and you write in the WhatsApp group, do you forgive me? That does not work. It's not what Chazal meant when they said, you have to go and you have to ask. You have to ask from the individual person forgiveness. The question is, what if you don't know? What if you don't know who you've offended or what you've done, etc. Right? So we try and get back from everybody. So that's why in the tefillah that we say in tefillah zakah, right before kol nidre. So there's a paragraph there which is actually printed out of order. The Chafetz Chaim said that many people don't get to the end of tefillah zakah because it's a very long tefillah, and but this paragraph is very important. So he said even if you don't get to the whole thing, you should say it, and that's why it's normally printed actually far earlier on. But it's out of place, and that's where we say, okay, since we know that Yom Kippur only atones for Ben Adam Makom, but not Ben Adam Lechavero, therefore I forgive anybody who has wronged me, and I pray that whoever I have wronged will forgive me as well. And you hope that everybody else is saying Tefillat Zakah, and then that way you can that way, right? But it's the same sort of idea in terms of that we try and right appeal to the Rabbim, appeal to everybody where we can't find those individuals who we may have wronged as well. The famous mashal, I don't remember exactly what the source of this is, but was the person who came to the Rav and he said, he spoke in Lashon Hara. How does he get atonement for that? The Rav was speaking Lashon Hara, so the Rav says to him, go take a pillow, right? And he brings a pillow and a knife, and he says, now cut open the pillow, right? And all the feathers go and they start scattering all over in the wind, etc. And then he says to him, okay, now go and gather up all the feathers. He says, how am I going to go gather up all the feathers? It's impossible. They've all gone in different directions. They've all dispersed. He says, okay, well, Lashon Hara is the same thing. You've gone and you've spoken about it. You don't know how far it's gone. You don't know who's heard it. You don't know who's spoken it. You don't know what damage it's caused. How are you going to go back and bring all that back? So it's the same thing. So the best we can do in such a scenario is to try and go and benefit the Rabbim and benefit tzorchei Rabbim, and in that way we can hope that they'll get some. Everybody will get back what they deserve. Okay, there is something interesting I saw, maybe a little bit unexpected as well. From time to time we quote the Chashukei Chemed. Chashukei Chemed is Rav Zilberstein. He goes through, he has shutim basically related to the daf. Goes according to the order of the Shas. Sometimes the shutim are more directly related to what we see in the Gemara. Sometimes they're less directly related. Okay, but a question, a very fascinating question. And he quotes relating to this Maseh B'Avashul. He says, "Sheila, ha'im yesh skula la'avod avodat Hashem bevriut la'orech yamim." Is there a skula to be able to serve Hashem in health for long days? A skula for health for a long life. Okay, everybody wants skulot. So he writes, Mori Chami Zatzal, Mori Chami of Rav Zilberstein, he's talking about Rav Eliashiv. He says, "Ya kol yamav chalush me'od, savar mechusha balev, v'haya ba mezeg chalush me'od." He says he was a weak person. He wasn't very strong and fit and all that. He had a weak heart. Achilato moetet, he didn't eat very much. Ubechol zot zachal alchut yamim, but he lived a very long life. V'lamot chushato hagav b'tor yomam v'layla bli hefsek. And even though he was old and he was weak, but he never stopped. He was always, he barely slept. He was learning Torah day and night without stopping. So he says, what is the reason? What's the skula? Right now, obviously, every person is different, and for whatever reason, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives certain things to some people and to others, and we can't. This is not a. Sorry, just one moment. Sorry, I'm just Okay, sorry about that. So we can't necessarily know exactly why and what, but as I say, people are always looking for scholars, which might help, might not. But so what does he say? So he quotes two things. Um, but the interesting one is the second one, which he quotes, which is from our Gemara. It says in the Gemara Masechet Beitza, Daf Kaftet Amud Aleph, Tanu Rabbanan al Yoshua ben Bitnit, קנה 300 גבי יין מבעלי המידות, וחבריו קנו 300 גבי שמן ממצרים. Right, that's the 300 barrels of wine and 300 barrels of שמן. והביאום לפני הגזברים בירושלים, אמרו להם מיד אתם צריכים לקח, ומתחילה התכוונתם לגזור שלקוחות מוכנים על ידי טרדן ומרוצתן, שהם יכולים לשעות עוד, right, so this, it's quoting the Gemara, אסור מהם צורכי ציבור. And then he quotes here, there's a Yerushalmi that says, relating to this, that one says they got sick and they came and that Abashul ben Bednit seemingly got sick and they came to visit him. And they said to him, right, Mishu Zahir b'midotav, sheyeh midato shlema, ra'ui hu shegam mispar yemei chayav yu b'midah shlema. Just as he was very, very careful that his midot, right, that the measurements there should be full, so too the measurement of the days of his life would be filled up as well. Okay, it's very interesting, and there is a moral lesson here. I just want to preface again: this does not mean that anybody who lives a long life, it's because of this, and it doesn't mean that anybody who's makbid on this will necessarily live it, or somebody who did not live a long life was not on it. It doesn't mean that. Okay, obviously, I think everyone here understands these things are more complex. But his point is this: you know, Mishu, if and where this does work, how does it work? You know, Mishu chole, ein amim ha'elu nechshavim le'amim shlemim. He says when somebody's sick, right? So these are not considered full days, full years in a sense. When one is unwell, so one's unable to perform their avodat Hashem. Rak ben Adam, it's a very interesting way of looking at it. It's as if he's right for you. You're alive. People see you there. But it's not full life because he's incapacitated or whatever, and he's not able to do what he's meant to do. והנה מישהו זהיר בבירורי המידות ומדייק שלא יכניס הרתיחות של היין בחשבון המידה. Somebody's very, very careful when he fills up the barrel and he wants it to be full, so the extra little bit he adds on for that because it looked like the barrel was full, but it actually wasn't full, right? He wants to put actual wine in, לא רתיחות של היין, נראה לעיני הבריות, שהמידה היא שלמה, not just bubbles and froth and things that makes it look like it's full. So therefore, when it comes to him, הוא ראוי שיתנו לו מספר ימי חייו, חיים ממש, לא ימים כאלו, שהם דומים לרתיחת היין, שאין בזה ממשות. In other words, he's making the comparison. He's saying, כביכול, as if, what's the skula? That just as the barrel is not actually full, so too one's days are not actually full, those days will be added on, those days will be made up for the fact that when one was sick, לכן ילדי מצווה זו, ראוי שיתרפא מחוליו וישוב לאיתנו הראשון. Okay. Again, we know that Cheshbonot Shamayim are much, much, much more complicated than this. And this is not to say that anybody this does or doesn't happen for. But the point is this. He says, obviously, the more that one is davek to the midah of being honest and being upright and being straight, so that could be a skula for living a long life and for having the ability to serve Hashem. Okay. Like I say, we can take. Everybody can look at skulot the way they want to look at skulot, but I thought it was an interesting comparison, an interesting way of looking at things. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Gemara continues now, going back to this, talking a little bit more about this idea of measuring. It says, where are we up to? We are 4 lines from the bottom. Ad Rav Chisda Ravana Ukva v'darash. Lo yimdod adam se'olim v'yiten lifnei behemto b'yom tov. Okay, so one should not measure out se'orim, measure barley in order to give to one's animal in Yom Tov. right? We're not dealing with the of measuring. Measuring is going to be a problem of uftin dechol. It's going to be a problem that it's like related to mekach or memka, right? As we've been discussing, you measure something in order to sell it. So the person's going to measure out the body to place before his animal, says Rashi, about halfway down on the left-hand side of the page of Rashi. Right? Meaning, obviously, you can't measure it out to know the amounts in order to sell it. But even to measure it to feed your animal. So he says, why? Looks like you're measuring it in order to sell. What can you do, however? Again, as we've discussed many times, he's measuring something not in the normal way, so that's different. So the Gemara says, "Lo adam selin v'iten v'nei b'em tov yom tov, aval kodel hu kav o kabayim v'noten ifnei b'em tov ve'no choshesh." What's koder? Koder means like to drill. Essentially, you take the kli, you have a pile of the barley, and you take the cup or whatever, and you put it in and take it out. That amount, that would be okay because that's not the normal way of measuring. That's just taking it to feed the animal, and that one does not need to be concerned. The anachtum, the cook, right? Modeh tavlin v'noten etoch kedei rato kedei shelo yakdiach tavshilo. The cook, he needs to know it's a very specific measurement of how much spice has to go in. So he's allowed to measure the spice in order that you're not going to ruin you're not going to ruin the soup. You put in too much salt or whatever it is. This actually, by the way, is one of the Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishnah Berurah writes that you're allowed to measure if ordinarily the way that a person cooks and they put in all their spices that they just estimate, a pinch of this and how much it seems that you don't actually measure it out on a weekday. So then, of course, you'd not be allowed to measure it out on Yom Tov either. But it's only if that's normally the way one would cook and one would measure very specifically. So then one can do that as well. Okay, Adkan, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.